The first scripture, actually the only scripture, is John 21, verses 9 and 10 and 15 through 19. It's after the resurrection and after Jesus had instructed the disciples to fish. And then Jesus appeared to them on the beach. When they had gone ashore, they saw a charcoal fire there with fish on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish that you've just caught." And when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." And then a second time, Jesus said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." And Jesus said to him a third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." And Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. And after he said to Peter, "Follow me." That's the end of the reading. So Peter led me in the direction of St. Peter jokes, of course. Why did St. Peter call a podiatrist? Because something was wrong with Heaven's Gate. This next one, I don't know. It's another one that's a little on the edge, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. The three guys who knew each other, they died and they went to heaven and they stood before St. Peter. And St. Peter said to the first one, "Hey, you guys were all married, and I want to know if you were faithful." And the first one said, yes, I was, completely. And St. Peter smiled and said, "Yes, you were. You're not hiding anything from us here. Yes, you were, and your reward is a Ferrari to get around heaven." The next guy came up, and St. Peter looked at him, and this guy was a little less enthusiastic, and he said, "What's your response?" And he said, "Peter, you know, I struggled a little bit, you know, that was that time." And Peter said, "Yeah, you told the truth. Good for you. You get a Prius." Then the third guy came up just kind of looking at the ground, and St. Peter said, "How about you?" And the guy said, I guess it's pointless to lie, isn't it? No, you know, Peter, I was not an honorable man." And Peter said, "Okay, thanks for telling the truth. You get a Vespa." So they're in heaven, and they're tooling around, and finally the guy in the Vespa really didn't like the guy with the Ferrari much. He was a little too righteous for his own shoes, you know. And he saw them, and he finally stood up, and he pulled up his Vespa next to the Ferrari, and he said, "Hey, your wife finally made it." And he said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I saw her on roller skates." Ooh, okay. All right. But my absolute favorite, it's not even a joke, but my favorite St. Peter story, it's actually a message in and of itself. A guy goes, he was actually a minister, and he goes before St. Peter, and St. Peter says, "Why should I let you into heaven?" And the minister says, "Well, I was an ordained minister for close to 50 years. I served the church faithfully. Doesn't that count for anything?" And St. Peter said, "Oh, well, okay, you need 100 points to get in. I'll give you 5 for that." He's like, 5? That was my whole life. And he said, "All right, well, I led a whole bunch of mission trips and served the poor, and that's got to count for something." And he said, "Yeah, I'll give you 5 more for that." And he went through everything he could think of to justify his entrance into heaven, all the good things he had done. And finally, he's like, I'm not going to make it. And all of a sudden, this guy who was a degenerate reprobate, known for his debauchery in the town, just walked right by him and waved at St. Peter and walked right in. And the minister said, what's up with this? And St. Peter said, oh, he doesn't play this game. Isn't that good? If you don't hear anything else, just take that one home, all right? So, the reason I chose that text, what I'm going to do is give two pretty brief messages. The reason I chose that text was because it made me think of our Befrienders program. And I just want to say that I'm pretty much blown away, Gene, by what you have brought to this congregation through this program in the last several years. And Martha and Walt and others who helped. But I remember shortly after I first got here, Gene came by and stopped in and said, sometime I want to sit down with you and tell you a little bit about who I am and what I've been up to. And she shared with me all these programs in the Conference Lay Academy at the time that she had participated in, all this training that she had received herself. And I could say, wow, this is a very equipped, committed person. And I just knew we had to find some way to let you loose. But I wasn't quite sure how you could use your gifts. And then you brought the Befrienders program, and I just said, yeah, run with that, and you have. And it has been such a beautiful expression of you using your gifts in service to this community, and then equipping all these other people to do the same. And so, just a beautiful, beautiful expression of giving away what you have received. And anybody in recovery, this is basically the 12th step here, right? You don't get to keep something unless you're giving it away. So the freedom that you find in the healing and the joy in being loved by God, we give that away. How? By serving somehow. Just one other point to make quickly about this conversation between Jesus and Peter. As I've pointed out before, there's only one other time in the entire Bible when the word for charcoal fire is used. And it's when Peter denied Jesus. You know that story? Right after, Peter, the Chosen does a pretty good job of casting Peter. Peter was kind of a cocky guy, tough, sure of himself, rough around the edges. But Jesus saw something in Peter that he knew if this gift can be channeled in a good way, this guy is going to be a force for God. And when Jesus was facing the end and he told the disciples what was going to happen, Peter, remember at the Last Supper, he said, hey, even if everybody else deserts you, I will never leave you. I'll fight for you. And Jesus says, you know the story, before the rooster crows in the morning, you're going to deny that you even know me 3 times. And sure enough, when the soldiers came in the Garden of Gethsemane to arrest him, Jesus, Peter, he meant what he said. He drew his sword and cut off the ear of one of the servants of one of the Roman soldiers. And Jesus famously told Peter, no, put the sword away. And then those very famous words, those who live by the sword will die by the sword. And then all the disciples, including Peter, ran away. They were afraid, understandably. I would have been. But Peter went back to try to find out what they had done with Jesus, and he got close to the courtyard, and there were some people warming themselves by a charcoal fire. And one of them recognized Peter and said, hey, I saw you with Jesus. And he said, no, you didn't. I don't know him. Another person, yeah, you sound like him. You have the same accent as Jesus. No, I don't know who you're talking about. A third person says, no, I saw you too. And he said, I don't know him. And then the rooster crowed. And the Bible tells us that Peter went away and wept bitterly. That he let him down. So why at this charcoal fire does Jesus take Peter and say 3 times, "Do you love me?" And 3 times he says yes, and he says, "Okay, feed my sheep, tend my lambs." The lambs are the most vulnerable. In other words, if you love me, then show it by serving. And you'll have a lifetime of opportunities to show it. And all I want to say is, if you, like Peter, have been someone who has blown it at some point, or maybe made a complete mess of your life at some point, or feel like, you can't be a befriender or a minister or a servant of some kind because you're too much of a mess up, remember Peter. Jesus does amazing things with regular people who screw up all the time. Because that's all of us. All right. We all need to find our ministry. Befrienders is one way to do that. It's beautiful. Maybe you have a different way. But you've heard me talk many times about the breathing in and breathing out in the life of faith. Breathing in, connect with God. Know how loved you are. All the internal disciplines, prayer, connect, spirituality. But then breathe out. Serve. Find a way to give back. They're both equally important. Minister, that word just means serve. It's not a profession. It's all of us. And that leads me to Micah 6:8, once again, that we sang. What does God want us to do in this world? Not just as individuals, but as communities. Who are we in this world? We are people who will do justice, fairness, love, kindness, or mercy, it's often translated. Be compassionate. Be a presence of compassion in this world. And do it while walking humbly with God. Don't be too full of yourselves. Let's not think we've got it all figured out. Humbly show up, stand for justice, stand for love. Well, that takes me to last night. And Art, are you in here? Okay, he's back there. All right, you can hear me, Art? Yeah, okay, yeah. Those of you who came and saw Native American artist Bill Miller and Art in his full Native American regalia dancing for us, it was amazing. And Art, you have no way of knowing how Art gave me a great honor. It bestowed upon me an eagle feather, which from a tribal perspective is a pretty big deal to give to a white man, evidently. I was touched in the depths of my being, but you don't know the half of it. And I wanted to wrap my message up today by telling you a little bit why that touched me so deeply in conjunction with Micah 6:8. I've been trying, by the grace of God, and I can tell already this, it's going to be hard for me not to get emotional here, so don't be distracted by my tears if they show up, okay? I've been trying to live out the justice of God my entire 50 years of following Jesus. It's been a passion. I graduated seminary in 1984. I was 25. And immediately after my last exam, I packed up my pregnant wife and my dog and my cat and put all our stuff in a U-Haul and drove to northern Wisconsin to become the pastor of the Highland Lakes Parish, which is a church in Elko, Wisconsin, in between Antigo and Rhinelander, and a little church that looked like a Norman Rockwell painting in a town of about 100 people 15 miles away called Kempster. I was there for 4 years. But immediately, well, initially everything was great. I was the new guy from, they made fun of me. I had a hyphenated last name. I was from New Jersey, northern Wisconsin. I was a cultural phenomenon to most of them, an Italian. I was there for 4 years. My name was Catlett Sirchio, hyphenated. And they had that out on the sign, but nobody liked it. And even after 4 years, they couldn't say my last name. I'd be over for dinner, and they'd introduce me to a neighbor. This is our pastor, Bryan. Yeah, we just call him Bryan. About 3 months in, when the ice began to melt on the lakes up there, it was the first year when the Native Americans who had realized, and the courts had verified their 19th century treaty rights, they realized that they still retained the rights to spearfish while the walleye were spawning on the lakes in northern Wisconsin. And at choir practice one evening, some members of my choir who had nice homes on some of these lakes were talking about it, and I was shocked at the racist rhetoric that was coming out of my church members' mouths. And I realized, wow, we got a problem here. I can't tell the whole story or even much of it at all. But I studied the issue and educated myself and learned what was going on. And my God-given sense of what was just led me to side with the Indians and to use the church as a place to educate citizens in the area about treaty rights and Indian sovereignty. To put it mildly, not everyone in the congregation was thrilled about this. I traveled to the tribal offices at Mole Lake and Lac du Flambeau and introduced myself to the tribal leadership and got to know them and told them that I wanted to use my connections with the church to try to work for justice in conjunction with the tribes. That's how I met Nick Hawkins not long after that, who was a tireless advocate, very good friend of Art and Dawn's. Tireless advocate, had him come to the church, several churches with me. We did programs together, educating people about these issues, trying to deal with it in a just and loving way in the spirit of Micah 6:8. I, together with some other people up there, started an organization called the Citizens for Treaty Rights. I debated the Christ brothers, who were the founders of PAR, remember PAR, People for Americans' Rights and Resources, and Citizens for Treaty Rights, which ideologically were the forerunners of MAGA. I realized when I debated them on the radio and they started spewing revisionist history, claiming that I was misinformed that the land was taken from the tribes. I was like, wow, this is a dark spirit here. Some of the members of my church were really happy about this, and we got a group together and went to Mole Lake, the nearest, near Crandon, nearest tribe, and I had made some friends there, and we just had this project. We renovated a park together. It was a beautiful thing. The local paper did an article about it, and after that, my life got stressful. It was an unpleasant time, and a lot of threats. And there was a funeral, and I did the funeral, and the funeral home was Bradley Funeral Home in Antigo, Wisconsin, owned by a man named John Bradley. John Bradley was one of those 5 servicemen in that famous picture on Iwo Jima, raising the flag. He never talked about it, and word was out that he would not talk about it. Don't ask him. After the funeral service, I would often get in the hearse and ride with John to the cemetery. And I got in the hearse that day, and it was right after that article had been in the newsletter, and I had just washed eggs off the front door of the church. And John said to me, he said, "You know, Pastor, you heard about my service record, probably, right? Everybody knows. I said, yeah. He said, I don't talk about this. You probably heard that too, didn't you? I said, yeah. He said, but I want to tell you something. One of those men in that picture with me was an Indian from Wisconsin. He was my brother, and he was my friend, Ira. And Ira could not deal with the publicity around that picture and us being forced to be paraded around the country as heroes by the government. And he said, Ira in particular, being an Indian, was the victim of vicious racism as they forced us to do all these events. And people say that he drank himself to death. And yeah, he was an alcoholic. But what killed him was the racism. So thank you, Pastor, for being courageous enough to speak up and do what was right. That means a lot to me. And all I can say is his words hit me in about the same place as yours last night, Art. Thank you. John's son wound up writing a book about this. It's called Flags of Our Fathers. Clint Eastwood made it a movie. It was a bomb at the box office, but interesting. I don't know how accurate it is, but you can check it out. Doing justice means always, in whatever context you're in, asking who's being treated unfairly. Why? What can be done about it? And that brings us right to the present. We're going to close with a little song, a little chorus. I'm still kind of writing, but I'm going to teach it to you. But here's the words, and I don't need to say much else. Immigrants are children of God, human beings made to be loved. We denounce all policies of deliberate cruelty. What does God require of us? Stand for justice, mercy, and love. Heal this world with policies of deliberate kindness. In the name of God, deliberate kindness. My friends, one of the agonies of my leaving is that the world is just so messed up right now. And I feel badly. I mean, I'm doing what I know I'm called to do, so it's all ultimately good. But I hope and pray you continue to find your voice and that God gives you the courage to speak out and stand for deliberate kindness for immigrants and for anyone who is being systemically, intentionally dehumanized. It's a scary time in the world. All the more reason for us to together speak out, sing out, live out for justice. All right. So I'm going to teach this to you, then we'll be done.